What is going on, guys? Welcome back. Today we're going to be matchmaking UFC Fight Night, Taira versus Park. It was a really solid card. We got the seven best performing fighters here on the screen, and we're going to be matchmaking them today. Usually, we'd have about 12 to 14 fighters, but this was not the most name value rich card. So we're going to be starting off with Tatsuro Taira. Beat Jung Park in dominant fashion, dropped him, subbed him in the second. No worries here for Tatsuro. Taira took care of business very clearly. He called for Pantoja, right? I don't think he should be next for Pantoja yet. I think obviously since Van is going to be happening probably around late December, maybe November, I think that would be a long time to have Tatsuro Taira waiting out. I think that this is the perfect time to hit a number one contenders fight. There's another guy who's been on a win streak, rebuilding himself, former champion, Brandon Moreno. Brandon Moreno versus Tatsuro Taira is the perfect number one contenders fight to make. Brandon Moreno has put together wins versus Amir Albazi, who Tatsuro Taira was supposed to fight, also Steve Urseg, and then before that, I believe he had beaten might have been Brandon Royval, actually. It might have been Brandon Royval. But he's back on a three-fight win streak, Brandon Moreno. And I think him versus Taira sets up a very clear number one contender. Brandon Moreno gave Pantoja a very tough fight in their last fight. Probably the toughest fight that we've seen given to Pantoja, aside from maybe Urseg, but Brandon Moreno made it real close. Tatsuro Taira would be going up against the clear, probably. I'd say that Brandon Moreno, just skill technique wise, is still the second best fighter in the division. Van is the number one contender, but Moreno, just in general, second best fighter in the division. And I think that this is the perfect fight to make number one contenders fight. I would also consider Manel Cap versus Tatsuro Taira, but that doesn't put a good number next to their name because Cap is like number five, he's like number six. He just showed that he is levels above Jung Park, who is a really good fighter in himself. And I think that he should only be fighting, the top three-ish guys. He already fought Royval, very close fight, clearly learned a lot from it. Brandon Moreno is the fight to make. Moving on, Kevin Vallejos. Kevin Vallejos, he looked really underwhelming to me. I thought that he was going to go out there and knock out Danny Silva. There was moments, there was exchanges, there was pockets where Danny Silva landed on him. There was even like an elbow that he landed where he kind of had to like shake himself clear. He got taken down in moments. He just was not his best self. There are people out there saying, next fight, ranked opponent, we're coming for the belt. We are going to get Gene Silva back. This guy's 23 years old. He needs to be rebuilt, not rebuilt because he's not like on some losing streak or anything. He lost to Gene Silva, but he has to build himself back up slowly. He has to get maybe 5 to 6 unranked wins before he hits the rankings. I think that that is the right way to build prospects. We are too quick to throw these 23-year-old prospects into the deep end, and that's how they get fraud checked so early in their careers. I think that Kevin Vallejo should fight a guy who's been in the rankings before, is far past the rankings now, but he is better than Danny Silva, and it is a step up. I think he should fight Sadiq Yusuf. That's a good win. That's a win that Diego Lopez got to get him into the rankings. Sadiq Yusuf was like a 13th, 14th ranked guy in the featherweight division at one point. I think that Vallejos beating a Sadiq Yusuf and then maybe after that beating a Cub Swanson and then maybe like a Dan Ige and then we're talking about like the Arnold Allen matchups and then maybe Gene Silva's champ at the time so he could leverage a legitimate matchup. I think that Sadiq Yusuf is the perfect matchup. Tricky striker, solid in the grappling, just would give him an all-around test and a feel. This is the perfect step up for Kevin Vallejos. Winnable fight that is a guy who's been in the rankings, and it would just give him little things to pick up on, get kind of reads for, get more experience, different tests that he could kind of play with in the cage. Like, oh, he has this little thing that a guy that I fought has not had yet. I think that that would be the perfect matchup. On top of that, I think that that puts him one fight away from a ranked opponent, a guy who was just ranked. I think you get a Joe Anderson Brito, a Cub Swanson, a Pat Sabatini, just a relevant name after that, and then you're right there, ready to hop into the rankings. You could even have him fight Sadiq Yusuf and then Cub Swanson, and then make him do one more. Make him fight Calvin Cater or Giga Chikadze after he's out of the rankings. And then we're talking like Dan Ige, and then we're up to the Arnold Allens of the world, or maybe like a Yair Rodriguez off of a loss. And then this is like 2027, where there's a good chance that Gene Silva's champ. So he could leverage his storyline with Gene Silva to get a title shot, even if he was just a 5 or 6 ranked guy. By then, he'd be like 25, 26 years old. I think that that is the better time for him to attack that matchup rather than for like, let's get him into the rankings. There's guys who are already kind of in the queue for a ranked opponent at featherweight. You don't get to come in here, beat Danny Silva, and then jump the line of Chepe Mariscal and Nathaniel Wood and these really good fighters. You need to put together some legitimate wins versus guys who are high level. And I just think that's even the best idea, just to build him as a prospect. Moving on. Neil Magny. Great win versus Alesi Zaleski dos Santos. Unk has still got it. Finished him with ground and pound in the second round. Total war of attrition. Was able to avoid the dangerous positions, avoid the big shots of Alesi Zaleski, and he finished him in the second round. I think that Unk needs to get back to his gatekeeping job at number 14, 15 in the rankings. And there's a guy sitting there right now who I don't think's very good. And I think that he's the perfect man to get fraud checked. Gabriel fucking Bonfim. This little French bum terrorist of the sport. I think Neil Magny, he does not deserve to fight up the rankings. So he needs to fight somebody out of the rankings. And I think of either Randy Brown, who, he'd deserve it because he deserves a ranked opponent, or like the winner of Ruzaboev versus um Battle or the winner of Gustafsson versus Fakretnov. I think that all those would be decent matchups because he does have to pay his dues. He has to fight outside the rankings. He just barely beat a legend. Should not have won that fight. But I think Neil Magny's the right one, actually. I think that it gets Neil Magny, if I think he'd win, I think it gets him back to his gatekeeping spot of number 14 or 15 in the world. And I think that the tough prospects will have to get by him. I think that this is a little French soy boy, just like how Mike Mallet was a Canadian soy boy, and he got exposed by Neil Magny. I think that this is the fight to make. Neil Magny versus Gabriel Bonfim. Moving on. Chris Duncan looked very, very solid. I think that it was a closer fight than the judges did. I thought it was a very, very close 29-28. But I rate Mateusz Rambecki very highly. I think that Mateusz Rambecki is a top 15 fighter in the division, whether the numbers show it or not, whether he's has a number next to his name or he doesn't. Him beating him means he needs to get a ranked opponent. There's a guy who I think, and I don't think Chris Duncan's a world beater. But then we look at like number 15, number 14, number 13. There's matchups that don't make sense. I don't see him fighting Grant Dawson. Grant Dawson is on a crash course up the rankings. I have a guy for Grant Dawson that he needs to be fighting. I think that BSD that wouldn't even make sense because he's booked up versus Roofy. And then on top of that, you got guys like Michael Chandler down there. He has not earned a Michael Chandler matchup. That is for a guy who has a bit of a name, maybe a Terrence McKinney, who's been going for that fight as of late. I think that Chris Duncan should fight a guy because this is mainly because I think it's a winnable matchup for this guy, and it is kind of like a, company man move. And this is the company man of company men, Renato Money Moicano. I think this is the perfect matchup. Duncan is not this dangerous, dangerous guy on the feet or on the ground. He has a nasty gilly, but I'd say Moicano is a better jiu-jitsu artist. This would be a good, approachable matchup for Moicano. You fight out the rankings versus a guy who's on a win streak. You pay your dues, and then your hype is back. You just lost to Benil after losing your title shot, so your hype is fully at the ground, and you have to rebuild it. I'm gonna still be a Money Moicano fan. I'll be rooting for him till the day that he retires. I am a Show Me the Money podcast listener. I'm a fan of Money Moicano. I think that he can get back in the ranking or back in the win column. He still is in the rankings. And I think that this is the perfect approachable matchup. Beat a guy outside the rankings, then call for a ranked opponent again. You're on a 2-fight losing streak. You got to jump outside the rankings and pay your dues. He's been calling for Michael Chandler. I think that that is a guy who also needs to pay his dues and finally fight a bum. He only fights, or not bum, but like an unknown guy, a dangerous up and comer, a Fares ZM. I don't mean to call any of those guys a bum, just a lesser known guy. That's somebody who Michael Chandler needs to fight, like a Fares ZM. Or damn, I'd even be okay if Rombetsky got him after that. That was a sick performance. And Rombetsky puts on sick performances. That would be a fun one with Michael Chandler co-main event to a fight night, just saying. But I think that this is the perfect matchup. Obviously, I don't have Rombetsky on here. Actually do have a matchup for him later, which we'll talk about right now. Um, Moicano versus Duncan is the fight to make. I'm gonna skip Jung Sung Park just because I brought it up. I think that we should make the banger of bangers co-main event to a fight night, but not an Apex fight night. This needs a crowd. Mateusz Rebecki versus Esteban Ribovic. Esteban Ribovic coming off of a nice win over Elvis Brenner, but he lost his fight before that, so you can justify this. Then Rebecki had just beaten Midabek Oralbai, who is a tough out in the lightweight division. He is probably a top 15 fighter in himself. I think that Rebecki getting that win is huge. Going to that close of a decision with Chris Duncan, where he honestly he would have won if that one elbow didn't just land. Because volume wise, he did better, all this kind of stuff, but the optics of it are so bad when you're pouring blood. He would have won that fight if he just wasn't pouring blood. I truly believe that. I think if it was just looking at it from, oh, he's out voluming, he's landing more often, I think he would have won that fight. So this is not one that puts him back badly. And these guys just fought on the same card. They both went to absolute war. So they're both going to be on a very similar times table where they will be looking to turn around probably towards the end of this year or towards the start of next year. I think that this would be probably one of the greatest fights of all time. Truly. If you're looking at Esteban Ribovic, who has just had that fight that he just concluded versus Elvis Brenner and the Zell Huber fight, which were last year fight of the year contender. This just put his hat in the ring for another fight of the year contender. Then you have Mateusz Rebecki, who had a barn burner with Midabek Oralbai, fight of the year contender, and then a fight of the year contender with Chris Duncan. This would be an unreal fight. Book this shit, please. Moving on. Jung Sung Park, the loser of the main event. He was unranked before this, right? He needs to get a good win back. He was 10 and 0. I say this guy just stepped up on short notice, hooked this fight, on top of the fact that he was willing to take that fight versus Urseg before. I think he deserves another ranked opponent. I wouldn't hold that loss against I would not hold the Taira loss against him. Let's fight Bruno Silva. Bruno Silva is not all that good in himself. Bruno Silva is a very, very winnable matchup. And I think that it would only be right to do right by him. I think that he was so good in what he did for the company, stepping up, taking that fight on short notice, that the only option is for him to fight back in the rankings. And I think Bruno Silva is the perfect guy. I see Bruno Silva as the can with a number next to his name, where that's why I matched him up with Josh Van when I did. I said, if I want somebody that I like to get in the rankings, I want them to fight Bruno Silva. Bruno Silva is not good. If not, give him the loser of Tim Elliott versus Taya Sakura or something like that. Only if it's Tim Elliott. Um, but he deserves a ranked opponent. I think that him doing that for the UFC said, "Hey, I'm a company man. I'm doing this. Like you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours," type of thing. I think that he deserves that matchup. I think that he needs to get back into the rankings after this because I'm not holding a Tyra loss against him. Not one bit. I think that he deserves that matchup. Moving on. Austin Bashi, aka Oscar from Fish Hooks. Ball knowers will know. He looks just like him, actually. Hook no damage, dominated John Giannis. First round, rear naked choke. I think he's going to be looking to turn around quick. I think that there's a matchup in the featherweight division that makes too much sense. This guy is the perfect guy to fight on a Perth card. 5, 6 week turnaround. I think that Bashi could do it, took no damage, and he probably would not mind getting another check, getting another name on his resume. And this guy is an Aussie, so he'll be wanting to fight on the Perth card. Jack Jenkins. Jack Jenkins would take this fight because it's in Perth. He's going to want to get on that card, whether it's on short notice or not. And Bashi is the perfect guy. We've seen the likes of Gene Silva turning around after he beat. I think he beat Jourdain and he turned around and beat Dober. We've seen Van beat Bruno Silva, turn around in a couple weeks, and now he's the number one contender, beating Roy Val. We've seen a lot of guys have success doing this, and I think for a young guy, just dominated an absolute can, did not take any damage. I couldn't even remember John. I don't think John Giannis landed a shot in the whole fight. So Bashy's gonna be unbelievably fresh and ready to go. Speaking of cards, I'm surprised that Moreno didn't get on the Mexico card at all. He's like the Mexican fighter in the UFC, but in general, I would like to I would like to see that. Obviously, that's not one that would make sense to turn around. That's in like a month. This one's in like 2 months. So this is at the end of September. It's the beginning of August. I think that Bashy versus Jack Jenkins would make too much sense. It's a relevant name. It's a somewhat of a test for Bashy, but I also don't see him being as good as Christian Rodriguez. So I don't see him giving troubles to Bashy in that same way. But at the same time, it's a big fight because it would be in Perth. It would be a good one to be like, the enemy, he's on the road and taking care of business. Like that's something that you kind of want early in your career to get that good experience under your belt. Turn around after taking no damage, getting another check, maybe getting a bonus. I think that would be the perfect matchup for Bashy. What do you guys think about my matchups? Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to comment down below who you want to see these guys fight next, or if there's any fighters from the card that I did not matchmake who you would like to see fight. Do you think that Brandon Moreno versus Tatsuro Taira is the fight to make? And do you think that Kevin Vallejos is ready for a ranked opponent? I personally do not. And thank you guys for watching. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe. We will probably drop another video today just because we got the time and I got a video that I kind of want to make. Thank you guys for watching and peace.